7 years old. That was how young Amanda Bynes was when she first stepped in front of a camera. She didn't hesitate. She beamed. America saw this child and immediately realized this one is different. Amanda Bynes, America's little sister. At 13, she hosted her own comedy show. For a decade, her name was among the brightest in Hollywood. And then, on an ordinary day in New York, she was seen on a busy street, without clothes, alone, aimless, in the middle of the city. What no one suspected at the time was, this downfall hadn't begun when the world stopped looking. It had begun long before the world had even started looking. When people think of Amanda Bynes, they first remember that smile, that irresistible, unposed smile that infected everyone in the room. It wasn't the product of training. It wasn't a learned craft. It sat deep within her, warm, instinctive, unstoppable. But behind that smile, behind the spotlight and the applause, behind the camera that turned off, lived another story. One that no one told as long as the glamour was still blinding. One that only became visible when it was almost too late. Amanda Bynes' story is not a simple narrative about fame and downfall. It is the story of a person who was trapped from the very beginning in a system that failed to protect her, and who still found a way back. Behind the scenes, the story looked completely different. Amanda was 7 years old when she went to her first audition. Not because someone pushed her to do it, but because she wanted to. She had this energy, this natural urge for the stage that couldn't be suppressed. The camera loved her, and she loved the camera back. Her career took off quickly. Commercials, small appearances, then larger roles in children's and youth programs. It was clear early on that Amanda wasn't just another talented kid. She possessed that rare combination of timing, expression, and presence that cannot be taught. Producers recognized it. The audience recognized it even faster. At 13, she crossed a threshold that was unique in the history of American television. She became the youngest host ever, the record holder to carry her own show. The Amanda Show ran for 3 years. Week after week, she slipped into dozens of characters, changed wigs and costumes, performed sketches, improvised, coordinated, and guided the program. What an experienced comedian can barely manage, a teenager handled with apparent ease. That is the part most people never learn about. Because while the world looked at this radiant girl, something was happening behind the scenes that couldn't be seen on the screen. The man who produced The Amanda Show was named Dan Schneider. He was the most powerful producer in American children's television, with a sense for ratings that no one in the industry could challenge. He led series after series to success. His name stood for hits, and his word carried more weight on set than any contract. But what Dan Schneider did with this influence had nothing to do with television. But what happened next changed everything. His shows contained scenes that no one would have expected in a children's program. Young actors were locked in tight glass containers, covered in garbage, forced to endure insects. Another actor had peanut butter smeared on his body. Dogs were allowed to lick him while the cameras rolled, for ratings, for laughs, for Schneider. And then there was something else, something quieter, something more disturbing. In almost all of his productions, an obsession emerged that couldn't be ignored once you became aware of it. Bare feet. Not occasionally, not randomly, systematically, conspicuously, with a frequency that made any explanation other than a fetish hard to comprehend. Feet were held up to faces. Actors had to lick each other's feet. In places where shoes were a given, actresses suddenly appeared barefoot. Puppet figures were wedged between toes. For whatever audience these scenes were intended. The truth, when it finally came to light, was much darker than expected. Even Ariana Grande, today one of the most famous singers in the world, had appeared in Schneider's productions as a teenager and had to perform barefoot scenes on camera. Inexplicable for a children's program, apparently not for Schneider. According to reports from former actors, he also took private photos of feet on set, secretly without the knowledge of those involved. One parent whispered to their child, "Don't let him take pictures of your feet." On the official social media account of his shows, he called on viewers to write the program's name on the soles of their feet and upload photos of it. When Schneider was confronted about this pattern, he denied everything. He claimed children naturally found feet funny and harmless. No sexual intent, no crossing of boundaries. But the testimonies piled up. Reports of shots focusing on specific body parts of the actresses, which were used in oddly configured quiz segments. Reports that female candidates at auditions were explicitly asked to wear shoes that exposed their toes. Schneider's explanation could not bear the weight of these testimonies. And in the midst of all this darkness, Amanda Bynes became the chosen one. Dan Schneider and his wife regularly invited Amanda into their home. Not on set, not during filming, into their private life. Amanda spent time with them, away from the cameras, away from her parents. And over time, she developed a bond with the Schneiders that became stronger than anything connecting her to her own family. That was no coincidence. It was the structure of a relationship that systematically isolates a child from their protective environment. Amanda's parents were not bad people, but they didn't understand the world of show business, not the way Schneider understood it. Conversations with him flowed more easily, deeper, more trustingly. And when puberty hit, when conflicts with her parents increased, when the gap between Amanda and home grew ever wider, it was Schneider she called. Not her mother, not her father, Schneider. On the outside, it looked like success. Underneath, something was breaking. When Amanda was 16, Schneider actively tried to legally separate her from her parents. He hired a lawyer at his own expense to enforce the legal independence of the underage girl in court. The court denied it. The reasoning was missing. But the news that an adult producer had gone so far sparked public outrage. Who separates a 16-year-old girl from her parents, and why? Then pictures surfaced. Amanda and Dan Schneider together in a hot tub. Amanda wore a swimsuit. Schneider wore street clothes. The atmosphere in the photo didn't look like a working relationship. Reports from the set said that Schneider treated Amanda like a lover. Regular hugs, a closeness that went beyond what could be professionally explained. Rumors emerged, persistent ones. And to this day, the name Amanda Bynes appears in search engines alongside the word pregnancy. A rumor that was never officially confirmed, but never completely disappeared. In 2018, it was finally over. An internal investigation at the network unearthed sufficient evidence, unauthorized abusive behavior toward actors, inappropriate actions. Dan Schneider was fired, with a remaining contractual salary equivalent to around 7 million euros, which he received anyway. He left, without consequences that matched his behavior. Amanda remained, with everything those years had done to her. Despite everything, Amanda Bynes had managed to build a career during this time that hardly anyone would have thought possible. After the Amanda Show ended, she made the leap to the big screen, and succeeded. In a family movie alongside Colin Firth, the British superstar at the time, she played his on-screen daughter. The audience loved her. The press praised her natural charisma, that smile that left no one indifferent. She was mentioned in the same breath as Lindsay Lohan and Hilary Duff, the big names of teen Hollywood in the early 2000s. Then came She's the Man, a comedy about a girl who disguises herself as her twin brother and infiltrates his school to get revenge on her ex-boyfriend. Amanda played both characters, female, male, between worlds, and she was brilliant. But what happened next changed everything. The movie was a success. Press photos appeared everywhere. And in these photos, Amanda was barely recognizable. Short hair, a muscle suit under several layers of clothing, everything designed to fake being a young man. The articles praised her performance, but the images they showed were alien, unglamorous, unrecognizable. Amanda saw these pictures over and over again, and something inside her began to shift. She had just become an adult. The age when looking at one's own body can be particularly painful, and what she saw in the media was an image of herself that she did not recognize. The thoughts that followed were simple, but destructive. Am I this ugly when I don't wear makeup? Have I gained this much weight? This is the part that most people never find out. The reality was that the altered appearance was completely staged. Costume, padding, styling, all calculated for the role. But the mind of a young person who is just beginning to view their body through the eyes of others does not make this distinction. Amanda began taking weight loss pills, substances that were unapproved and untested at the time. Her weight dropped, but her face swelled. Her cheekbones lost their definition. The aging process visibly accelerated. In her next movie, this transformation was unmistakable. Part of the audience didn't recognize her. The critics who had once raved about her radiance were now silent, or turned to another name. Emma Stone, who co-starred in the same movie, was celebrated as the discovery of the year and nominated for a Golden Globe. All the lights on her, not on Amanda. And then, without any warning, everything collapsed. Amanda Bynes was 24 years old when she announced her retirement. Not in a press conference, not through an agent, via social media, in just a few sentences. She said she could no longer stand to see herself on television. The profession wasn't as entertaining as it looked from the outside. That was all. And then she was gone. The world kept turning. Emma Stone, Jennifer Lawrence, Amanda Seyfried. They filled the void. The name Amanda Bynes faded. A little more year after year. A few years after her withdrawal, Amanda Bynes returned, but not in the way anyone had imagined. Posts that seemed disturbing began piling up on her social media channels. Not harmless nonsense. Targeted, vicious attacks on other celebrities. Rihanna, one of the most famous singers in the world at the time, was attacked with a statement that alluded to Rihanna's well-known experience as a victim of domestic violence while simultaneously mocking her appearance. The internet was ablaze. Amanda kept going. Jay-Z, Barack Obama, Michelle Obama, one after another with no discernible pattern, no context, just insults, just ugliness, coming from a woman who had once been loved for her kindness. Behind the scenes, the story looked completely different. Celebrities spoke out. Supermodel Chrissy Teigen publicly asked people not to provoke Amanda any further, saying this wasn't a funny spectacle, it was a mental health crisis. Amanda's response was a personal attack on Teigen's appearance. Further attempts by the public to get through to her failed in the same way. Some celebrities reached out to her privately, with messages discussing their own mental illnesses and offering to connect. Amanda refused. She claimed nothing was wrong with her. Her appearance changed rapidly. She intentionally wore disheveled wigs. She pierced both of her cheeks. What she expressed toward others, ugliness, disfigurement, decay, was reflected in her own public self-presentation. It was as if she wanted to pass judgment on herself before others could. One day, the police received a call from the building manager of her apartment complex. Amanda was muttering to herself, was barely responsive, and appeared to be consuming illegal drugs, openly, visibly, without hiding. The officers responded. When they knocked on the door, Amanda reacted with lightning speed. She threw an object out the window. When questioned, she said it was a vase, a tiny vase, harmless. But the reality was different. The apartment was on the 36th floor of a high-rise in the heart of Manhattan. Whatever was thrown out of that window, a pipe or a vase, could have killed people on the street below. Amanda Bynes was arrested. The mugshot circulated everywhere within hours. It was inevitably compared to the mugshots of Lindsay Lohan, the other shining career of that generation that burned out in a similar way. 2 stars, 1 era. This is the part that most people never find out. Even after the arrest, Amanda's thoughts revolved exclusively around her face, her nose, planned procedures. She didn't seem to grasp where she was or what had just happened. The court ordered psychiatric counseling sessions, twice a week, as a condition for dismissing the case. Amanda attended regularly, and then, less than 2 months later, the unthinkable happened. Amanda grabbed a gas can, took her dog, and drove to an unfamiliar residential neighborhood. There, on the property of a resident completely unknown to her, she started a fire, with gasoline right in the middle of a private driveway. When she lit it, flames sprayed onto her clothing. One pant leg caught fire. Gasoline landed on her dog. The disaster was accelerating toward a catastrophe that could have escalated with a single spark. She managed to extinguish the flames before they spread. What followed was no less bizarre. Amanda took the dog and entered a nearby convenience store. There she sneaked into an employee area, a laundry room, and tried to wash the traces of gasoline from the animal's fur. The smell of gasoline spread throughout the entire store. An employee found her. The police were called. Amanda was arrested again. This time, the court ordered a 72-hour involuntary hold in a psychiatric facility. Amanda's parents intervened. They petitioned the court for a conservatorship over their 27-year-old daughter, a legal instrument used in extreme cases, when an adult is demonstrably no longer capable of acting responsibly on their own. The court agreed. Amanda Bynes was now of legal age, and yet she no longer had legal control over her own life. Her assets, her medical decisions, all binding agreements, everything was in the hands of her parents. The truth, when it finally came to light, was much darker than expected, and rumors immediately arose. Amanda had been working since childhood. She had been in front of the camera from a young age, and had earned accordingly. At the time of the conservatorship, her net worth was reportedly equivalent to around 5 million euros. Her parents' first act as legal conservators was to commit Amanda to a psychiatric hospital. Not at Amanda's request, at theirs. Her mother called Amanda, convincing her to fly to Los Angeles, where her parents were staying. At the airport, Amanda was taken directly from there to the clinic. Speculation about whether her parents wanted to control the money spread quickly. Whether the commitment was out of care or calculation, no one outside the family knows for sure. What the world saw 4 years later was a different picture. 2018. Amanda Bynes appeared on the cover of a magazine. Well-groomed, calm, visibly recovered. In the long interview that followed, she spoke about the years in which she had lost herself. She apologized to everyone who had been hurt by her posts. She said she hadn't been herself. She said she was ashamed. She said she regretted destroying in a single moment everything that had taken a lifetime to build. And she shared a plan for the future. She was studying fashion design. But what happened next changed everything. She completed her education. She announced her own fashion line. Her parents, who had acted as legal conservators for almost a decade, filed to terminate the conservatorship, acknowledging that their daughter was ready. At 35, Amanda Bynes stood on her own again, free again, herself again. Then in 2023, the return. Her early television work celebrated an anniversary. The cast of the children's show that had once made her famous reunited 23 years later. For an official event, Amanda was invited. For the first time in years, she was supposed to stand in front of an audience that knew her, that had missed her, that had been waiting for her. Fans were excited. The media was excited. Everyone was excited. One day before the event, Amanda withdrew her attendance. The event took place without her. And the next day, the day after the event, Amanda Bynes was seen in New York, barefoot, alone, without clothes, on a busy street. She waved down a passing car and spoke of a panic attack she had just suffered. Then she called 911 herself. She asked for help. This is the part that most people never find out. In therapy following this episode, it became clear the prospect of the public appearance had triggered a paralyzing panic reaction. The fear of the audience, of being expected, of visibility, it was overwhelming. Amanda Bynes was placed on another psychiatric hold. When she was released, she looked changed. A heart tattoo on her forehead. Experts expressed concerns. Facial tattoos are considered a sign of emotional instability or impulsive decision-making patterns. But this time, no one just made comments. This time, someone noticed something else. That Amanda had dialed 911 herself. That she had asked for help herself. That is no small thing. That is a kind of self-awareness that cannot be taken for granted. Her parents decided not to file for another conservatorship. They would support Amanda in healing herself, in her own way, at her own pace. A year later, Amanda Bynes announced that she would be opening an account on a platform primarily known for explicit content. The public was concerned. Again. But Amanda was specific. She had no intention of posting explicit content. The platform served as a space for her to interact directly with fans, share glimpses of her everyday life, and talk about what was on her mind. Other celebrities, singers, actors had used the same platform in the same way. Amanda did too, and she kept her promise. On the outside, it looked like success. Underneath, something was breaking, but this time, not in a negative sense. This time, Amanda was working. In October of last year, she launched a collection, t-shirts and shorts printed with her own illustrations, completely sold out. In December, a pop-up exhibition of her artwork followed. 10 years after her disappearance, Amanda Bynes stood in front of people who knew her once again. This time, she pulled through. She wrote on social media afterward, "Last night was perfect. Studying fashion design was worth it." Amanda Bynes is 35 years old today. She keeps going, slowly, in her own way. Psychotherapy, fashion design, her own creations, and sometimes a photo on her phone, shared with people who no longer get to decide who she is. What remains when you look at the whole story? Perhaps this, that the loudest applause is not the loudest sign of well-being, that glamour and pain can inhabit the same space for a very long time without anyone noticing, that a child who grows up between the spotlight and abuse without anyone stepping in to protect them will one day pay a price, one they pay alone, and that a person who has learned to call for help for themselves, who dials 911 on a desperate morning on a street in New York, perhaps possesses more strength than it initially appears. Amanda Bynes has had all the attention in the world, and she has learned that this is not the same as being seen. Now she sees herself.